What's up, bookworms? This is Megan coming at you with another Cantina conversation. Today's episode features a chat with Bob Johnson. We're talking about his book, his collection of short stories, The Continental Divide, that is available now. Such a fun conversation with Bob. I always love short stories. You never know what you're going to get, but honestly, it's probably one of my favorite collections. It's if you're into the deep, dark shit, questionable characters, all that stuff, this collection will be good for you, especially stories from rural Midwest, if you can relate to that. And I just really enjoyed talking to Bob about how he develops his characters and just like the area that he grew up and just how his ideas came to life and how he develops those stories and what he's got planned for the future. But without further ado, here is Bob Johnson. So today we've got Bob Johnson. We're talking about the Continental Divide. That's a collection of short stories. Bob, thank you so much for speaking with me today. We're chatting a little bit. Like we said, this a collection of stories. The characters are not redeemable, fucked up, based on small, rural, sad town in the Midwest. And I found it very enjoyable, very entertaining. I'm excited to dig a little bit deeper today.
Sure, let's do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know how this would play out because usually I ask authors to provide like a summary of the book. So maybe if you can provide like a summary of the collection, if that's even possible, or just to give listeners so they can follow along with what we're talking about.
The collection called the Continental Divide is all based around a fictional town in northern Indiana called Mount Moriah. And Mount Moriah, by the way, is in the Bible, is where Abraham took his son Isaac to be sacrificed. And until God stayed his hand and provided a calf or a ram or something instead. It feels appropriate to me. There's a church outside town I used to live in called Mount Moriah, and the sense of the epic confrontations between good and evil. The church looks like a fortress. It's a big, heavy stone wall, and behind it is a kind of an ordinary building, almost a what do they call? It's almost like a ranch, a house in a way, but the front of it is this stone fortress, and it suggests to me the great confrontations, the great divides in human existence between sin and redemption, between men and women, between good and evil, between God and Satan. So it seemed like an appropriate name to give my town. The stories, 14 of them, are all based upon characters who live in this town. Some of them recur, although it's not a novel in stories. It's not a link collection in the traditional sense. But some characters do recur. And I hope that the town and the vibe and the maybe the milieu, the spiritual, psychological milieu becomes a character itself. So in that respect, that character, the town, is in all the stories. I believe it's mentioned in all of them but one. I'm not sure. There's a story in the middle called Please, Mr. Please that doesn't mention a town name. But the characters in that story certainly are residents of that same fucked up world.
Yeah, it's like in the same universe, but it's not necessarily like I definitely recognize some of those because I was taking notes like from each story so that I can remember what's going on and just to get a collective opinion. But I remember recognizing some of those names and I was like, oh, wait, what? And so I had to add and reconnect and some
Sure.
because I think one of the main ones that we continue seeing is like the sheriff, right? Or the town
The
marshal.
town marshal, Johnny Baker.
Yeah.
And I've told people in the Freudian sense of three, there's the ego, there's the id, and there's the superego. And Johnny Baker, although he is a representative of community law, government, he's a representative of government, which one would think is associated with superego, the superego in the human psyche. He nevertheless, for me, is the ego. He's that poor schmo in the middle of things, trying to find balance. And beneath him, the id are his son Mitch and other people like LT in the first story in the collection and that. Those people who satisfy their appetites without thinking very much. And the superego is the sense of what the sense of what ought to be, what should be according to government, according to government law. And poor Johnny Baker is there in the middle trying to balance his own life against these forces coming from above or below.
Yeah, yeah, I could tell because there's some stories, like, where he's like, his son is directly involved, and his impartiality is a little bit his diligence to his job is, like, being questioned, but nobody kinda wants to directly ask him, and he knows it, though, because it's such a small town, and he knows what type of person his son is, so he I got the impression that he was familiar with what other impressions of him
Yeah,
of
townspeople
his son.
confront Johnny and say, "You're not going easy on this kid just because it's your son, are you?" And Johnny says, if I remember right, he dares a man to ask that question again. Johnny's a big man and he doesn't take any shit.
Yeah.
But in the end, Johnny's toolbox, the toolbox that he always dips into, doesn't, he can't find the tools necessary to deal with Mitch and what happens.
Yeah, yeah. Just with the whole like, the overall theme is how you were saying, like, good versus evil, and it's just the human condition and just how humans just interpret their situations, and it's almost like a vicious cycle. Like, we all know that, where we're bred into our environment, and there's only so much that we can do to fight against our environment in this cycle, and it's like we keep repeating it generations after generations, and especially if your family is just settled in this town where they're in their ways, and there's certain thing, and it's multiple families that are generations and generations of they know if they know your last name, they know all they need to know about you, and it's just it's tricky and it's hard, but that's I think what made this so powerful, because it's like what could have been, right? If these individuals, and it's not just them, it's like the people who try to love them, it's the people who try are like their families and who try to like some of these I wanted to root for, but then I was like, I don't know, man. I'm just gonna see how this unfolds because this is I don't even know.
I'd like to argue with you gently in that
Oh, no, that's okay.
I think some of my characters are redeemable, but they're running out of chances to redeem themselves. Like, for
Yeah.
example, in Man on the Tracks, he is a man who is given to his temper, and his temper has gotten him in trouble. It's gotten him fired multiple times. He's lost his girlfriend. He's lost his home. And now he's in a situation where he might have a job or might not have a job somewhere in Iowa. But he runs into a man, he runs into a waitress, he runs into a cook in a diner where his temper wins the day again. As you say, it's a vicious cycle. He is who he is. My wife likes to talk about various people as being, if you cut them in half, they are who they are down to the very middle. And I think, unfortunately for Perry in The Man on the Tracks, that's what he is.
Mhm.
But we want him to be okay. We want Maisie in The Half Hour to be okay. We want Joetta in Her Precious Things to be okay. Even Edith in the first story. And I don't want to give
Oh,
away
yeah.
what happens, but even
No, that,
Edith.
like, that you set the tone with that one. I was like, I would say, like, I have 2 small boys, like, 4 and 7, and I'm just like, that one hit me, like, on that level, and I was just like, "Okay, like, no we know what we're gonna get into for the rest of the collection." It was
It
that
set the
one hit
table.
yes.
Yeah, it set the table, didn't it? It's my favorite story, although I like some of them, some of the other ones very much. I like the last one. I like The Devil's Age, where Johnny has to come to terms with who Mitch is and what has happened.
Yeah. Yeah, and I like some of the titles too, because it's go the Devil's Age. It's like where you're more, from what I remember, it's like where you're most susceptible or you're most like impressionable, and it's like that in between time before you're like you're coming either from adolescence and where you got to start thinking about your life and start making moves.
Yeah, I like to say, and in that story, and I've always thought this is true, in that story, Mitch is 17, and Johnny decides that 17 is the devil's age. When you're 16, you're still a kind of a mama's boy, you're still wet behind the ears. When you're 18, you're out of school, you're thinking about college or a job. When you're 17, all bets are off. It's the devil's age. It's the time, as you say, that you're most susceptible to sin and violence. I think that's especially true of boys. I think boys are more inclined that way at that age than young women are. I could be argued with on that front. Girls have their own devil's age.
Yeah, yeah, maybe it's a little bit younger, I don't know, because I just remember I wasn't a perfect teenager, but I think I gave off the facade that I was, so when I got in trouble a couple times in high school, and that's when I think some adults were a little bit surprised, but I think they were even I heard what people said about me, they were like, "No, she's a good kid, but she hangs out with the wrong people." And I'm like, "Those are my friends. What are you talking
Yeah, I
about?" I was
get
just
it. I get
with those people, and it's I still speak to them, like, I'm still friends with so many people that I hung out with in high school. We've all got, like, families and stuff. We were just, like, all the same. I think just looking at their circumstances, I think that they were just more noticeable in some of their or they were just judged easier. I don't know. Or maybe with the way I was judged, that was just a part of who I was, like the facade I put on. But it's yeah, it's tricky and it's I like exploring that the age how age comes into it. And
Well, at 17, you're in so many respects, you're grown up. And in so many other respects, you absolutely are not grown up.
yeah.
But you
Yeah.
don't know that at the time.
Yeah.
17 was a devil's age for me, for sure. I did a lot of really stupid things that I look back now in my dotage here in my old age, and I think, who was that kid? You got to go through it, and I survived. I didn't
It
kill myself.
yeah, I know, it's almost like a rite of passage, like, you get a rude awakening from all the bullshit that you get yourself into, and you're gonna learn the lesson either way, and now that I have 2 it's funny because my husband, he was like a little goody two-shoes, like Eagle Scout, and so now I'm like, I'm hoping that our 2 boys, like, follow that personality where I'm like
Yeah.
even though I'm already, like, prepared and I'm just like, "Okay, like, I don't wanna think about that right now." Just, like, take one day
They're going to go their own way, and there's a whole lot you can do about it. What I always
yeah,
say to my son, my two boys, and about my grandchildren, their children, I say, you plant the seed of kindness and goodness and that sort of thing, and you have to stand back and let it flower. And
yes,
it does. I'm seeing that in my grandchildren. The very seeds that were planted of kindness and politeness and being inclined to do good things for people who are, to not be bullies. I'm seeing
yes.
that in my grandchildren who are 12, 10, 11.
Oh gosh, that's tricky age too.
Sure.
That's middle schoolers are assholes. They, like,
Oh,
don't
they can be so mean.
yeah, even to, like, their parents. They just, like not just to each other, but even to their parents, they just I don't know, my son, he's already roasting me. He'll make, like, little comments. I'm like, "Excuse me?" Like, kinda borderline disrespectful, but also I can't help but laugh, or I try not to laugh because I'm like, "Okay, that's enough."
I
No, it's
understand. Of course, I've seen all that, of course.
yeah, yeah, it's just yeah, that is a rough age that I'm also not looking forward to because it's just and it's when I speak to all these different authors and I spoke to a like a child or adolescent therapist and we were speaking about that. He was like their attitude is you don't know what I'm going through and they're wrong but they're also right. They're like you've
Yeah,
been through your version of it
yeah.
and yeah, you're like so far removed where I'm
The wisdom you glean from your time means nothing to, yeah,
no.
for
No,
sure.
I try now, I'm like but no, the thing about kindness, it's so true, it's such a simple concept. If you
It
show
is.
kindness to them, you show kindness to others, and they see that, and they pick up on that, and they see how, like, even if I'm having a bad day, I still say please and thank you. I'm still like, even if I come off as a total grump, like, at the
Yeah,
very minimum, like, that's, like, the thing, and it's the positive reinforcement of, "Oh, that was really nice for you to do." Now, if it's between them, the 2 of them, between the 4 and the 7-year-old, they no. It's the Wild West.
sure it
Like, no
is.
man's land, like, they will bully each other. I'm like, as long as they know not to act like that outside of the house, I'm
Yeah, I
like,
get it for sure.
it's yeah. So it's I know, just, like, reading some of your stories, I'm like, "Oh, fuck." Just but that's almost like any story I read where it connects you as an author, writer, like, trying to connect with your readers on that level and have them, like, throw it in their face or have them explore or present them with these themes where it's just yeah, you gotta it's not just engaging, but it's, like, a little reflective and hoping that something will resonate
Yeah,
with the
for
readers.
sure. I had a teacher a million years ago who told me something that I've always remembered, and that is that characters in fiction oftentimes have what she called their bad faith burned away. That is what
Mm,
they believed in, like Johnny Baker's toolbox, the toolbox that he turned to help him deal with his son Mitch, who had took a kind of a criminal road. They have their bad faith burned away, but their bad faith has to be burned away for them to go
yeah.
forward into life and to perhaps be successful as grown, full human beings. So, my characters, when you say they're not redeemable, some of them aren't. And again, in Please, Mr. Please, everybody's bad and everybody gets killed. But for the most part, I think that my characters are going through a time when their bad faith is burned away, and then I don't write about what comes after. But
Yeah.
we might hope that what comes after is a fuller, wiser life.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that's the beauty of short stories. It's, "Wait, what happens next?" You're like, "Wait, how do we
People
see,
are
like,
always that to me. Wait a minute, that's all?
yeah, that's I've
Hmm.
after reading a handful of collection of short stories, I have as long as I know what to prepare for, 'cause I know I'm gonna want more. I know it's gonna end where it ends, and it's probably gonna be such a meaningful and perfect spot to end, but I'm still gonna want more. So it's as long
Sure.
as I know what I'm getting myself into, but it's just that's the beauty of short stories. You're trying to versus a 20 chapter or 40 chapter book, or what is it? I don't know, a 400-page book, you're trying to tell a story in 10 pages or
Yeah,
20.
your 10 pages, 5,000 words or something or
Yeah,
other. I like
yeah.
that. I like that for two reasons. One is I like the explosiveness of a short story. Oftentimes, the central character makes a gesture or has something happen to him, but he or she makes a gesture after which he'll never be the same. And I like that. And the other reason I like short stories is because I've always been ADD and they're easier to hang with. I mentioned
Yeah.
that to a class of students not long ago who were all themselves thinking about being writers. They were in the arts, and fiction and nonfiction. And I mentioned being ADD, which I was in school, and I was surprised they all nodded. It's like they were in that field. They weren't business people, they weren't business majors, they weren't scientists, they weren't historians. They were going into the arts. And when I mentioned being ADD, all the heads nodded, almost really seriously, almost every single one. They identified with it right away.
Or I also love the idea that today's generation, or at least the ones that are coming of age, like 20-year-olds,
Sure.
I think it is amazing how much more, like, self-aware they are and
Yes.
unapologetic. Like, my niece, she's just turned 21, and just some of the things where, like, I just feel so like, I've always felt comfortable kind of explaining things to her, but, like, the fact that she's just so understanding, like, how ki I see the head nods, I see the nonverbal cues where she's, "Yeah, absolutely," or she's not afraid to just say, "I'm not into this," or "I don't like this," or,
Yes.
like,
Right.
she just feels so comfortable, and I love that, and I appreciate that so much, and I think it's so interesting to see that generation just be like, "You know what? Yeah, I'm like, we're owning it. Like, I'm owning
Yeah,
it."
I think that's a valuable evolution. I think it is.
Yes.
I see it too. I mean, I'm a whole lot older than that, but I see it too. And their attitudes toward people who aren't like them, or toward gay people or trans people, and they're so accepting they don't care. It's you mention it being an issue, and they're saying, "What? It's not an issue. It's no, it's fine. It's cool. It's
Yeah.
who they are."
Yeah, 'cause I
Yeah, I
think
grew up in
generation
the yeah, I grew up in the 60s, and
what
whereas I
was it?
was probably somewhat
So was it
progressive.
Stonewall riots?
Yeah, yeah, it was around then. And whereas I was maybe moderately progressive as a kid, not in every respect, I nevertheless don't remember anything like what you describe. We were so strictured by communal attitudes and what we
Yeah,
were allowed to say and not
yeah.
say.
Yeah, and I think that's just yeah, like the hive mind. You don't it wasn't it was less you weren't I don't wanna say people were less confident, I think they were just less encouraged to be that louder lone voice,
Oh
to
no,
be
yeah,
like,
exactly,
"Yeah,
exactly.
what's the problem?"
If
Yeah.
you had a voice like that, you kept it to yourself. Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's so crazy, like, I think that's so fascinating that someone in your generation was like, has just you look on your collective experiences and what you've witnessed and how you see the society's, like, point of view shift, and
Yeah,
I think and, like, I appreciate that you're being honest where you're just like, "No, in some things I was progressive, at least progressive for that time," right?
sure, sure.
Versus but you're saying, "No, sometimes in some respects I wasn't," and I appreciate that.
My parents, of course, my dad was born in 1911, my mom was born in 1920, and they were Republicans. And yet, you never ever heard the N-word in my house. And if I uttered it, if I had brought it home and said it, I would have been punished. That's unusual for the time in a small town in
Sure.
northern Indiana. But it was the way it was. On the other hand, I remember my mom saying to me one time, Oh, they can go to 9 out of 10 beaches and they can't go to the 10th and they complain about it. They march about it. I grew up with that too.
Mm,
Says they, she means black people. So
yeah.
yeah, it was a whole different time.
Yeah, and it reminds me of my dad too, where he's about homosexuality. He admitted to me, he was like, "I used to not be okay with it, but I don't feel like that anymore." He's like, "I don't feel that way anymore." And I'm like, I
Yeah,
love that self-awareness and that it shows that he's just people who are like, "Yeah, you know what? I changed my views a little bit. I recognize some
sure.
things." And I think
Absolutely.
it's so important. I love it. Let's get back to your book though, because
Okay, let's do.
I feel like we could just go off on tangents and I want to respect our time. Maybe backing off of that, this was like your first published collection, right? Because you've had your stories featured in other publications
I've
like
had a
that?
number of stories published, but this is my first collection. Yes.
Yeah. So can I want to explore like your experiences with that. Was there any like what stood out to you? How did you prepare for it? Like any big lessons learned, stuff like that?
How did I prepare for the collection or writing in general?
Yeah, like well I'm guessing this was a whole new like experience for you.
It was. I graduated from the Iowa workshop in 1979, and that was a little while back. And I worked in commercial television, and I did some teaching, but mostly I worked in commercial television after that because I had to make a living. During that time, I almost never wrote at all. But then when I got back to writing after retirement, I discovered that I was writing all of these stories about, for a time, Mount Moriah had a different name, but I took
Mm,
on Mount Moriah finally. I settled on that. And I was writing all these stories from that kind of world. And before long, I said, I got an agent. I went to Kenyon, the writer's summer workshop, a couple of times. And I went to Breadloaf 4 times in Vermont. And I realized that I had pieces that fit together. They don't fit together in, as I say, in a novel in stories like Olive Kittredge, for example, but they do come from the same world, and I began to believe that I had a collection. And the agent at the time, we've parted company, but it was an amicable parting. She couldn't sell the collection to the big presses, and she blamed what she called the zeitgeist. And a short story collection is hard to sell. It's hard to get published. Novels are what gets published. And a
which is a
short
shame
collection
because I feel like
is a
there's
shame.
so much appeal in short stories.
And also novels by a man of my, a person of my gender and a person of my age and a person of my ethnic background. Yeah, I didn't exactly hit the sweet spot. But then I was able to find my way to the small press that picked me up, Cornerstone, and that took off. And then I don't know if the collection was rather reviewed in the New York Times weeks
Awesome.
ago. And a new agent has come about, and we're exploring. He wants me to write a novel, and I guess I'm writing a novel. That's next.
You could do it. You
Oh,
could
I
do
can
it.
do it.
It's
I
just
can do it. I just,
it's a new challenge.
a little bit at a time is what I tell myself because
Yeah.
I'm 4,000 words in right now to my novel, and I only have 60,000 to go. What's the big deal?
What? Just yeah. So who
Yeah.
cares? Just feels like you just have a to-do list. You're like, boom. I'm rocking it. I'm
Yeah,
rocking.
and 600, 700 words a day, and goodness
Yeah.
gracious, in a matter of weeks, you're there. No, it's going to be big. Yeah,
Yeah. No, even though we're joking around, that's a healthy outlook. That's a healthy outlook. Just to be like, you know what, just take one day at a time, take 1,000 words at a time, whatever is your process. But that'll be like really interesting for you, I think, to what you're used to and taking that with you as you're doing this new project.
yeah, it definitely will be a challenge because as far as short stories go, I don't exactly plot those out,
Mhm.
draw an outline before the fact. When I was younger and I'd write a story, I sometimes knew where it was going distinctly. I sometimes knew the final line, the final sentence, and I would aim toward it. I was
Mhm.
driving a truck down the road, I'd aim toward it, that gas station, that whatever at the end of the road. But I don't do that now. I don't plot them out. I go where they take me.
Yeah.
I go where the characters take me. And I really believe in that. I believe in following your nose. I don't think that's going to be as easy to do with a novel. If I follow my nose, I might find myself in a deep thicket, just wandering around lost, wandering in circles. I can't do that.
So Even if you're a pantser, I know a lot of people who write novels who take that same approach. They're a pantser. They, like, still follow their intuition and where the story's going, or they let their characters tell them
Yes,
where
for
what
sure.
needs to happen. I would still and I like I know anything about giving writers advice, but I'm saying do what you do, or you could also try something new and outline, and if that scares you, just go back to your go back to your other
Well,
method.
have you ever heard of the book called Save the Cat? It's
No, I
Save the
have not.
Cat. It began as a book about writing screenplays. And it was called
Okay.
Save the Cat. And I can't remember what Save the Cat as a title comes from. I can't remember its origin. But then the author of Save the Cat went on to write one for novel writers. And it gives you all the stages to go through. You're going to write the opening, you're going to write the opening, you're going to set the stage, you're going to introduce the hero, you're going to introduce the hero's friends. There are points along the way, and they're called beats. And their points like one of them is called the darkness of midnight or something like that. Something else is called all is lost. And the author goes through movies that we all are acquainted with. Like for the one, it's Bridget Jones' Diary, and we follow the beat. That structure, it strikes me as a very dry and
I was
academic
gonna say I've never
way.
seen it. I don't have any
Yeah,
desire to watch it.
very dry and academic way to write a novel.
Sure,
On
yeah.
the other hand, when a sculptor starts, doesn't the sculptor, he makes everything out of coat hangers, correct? And then he adds clay to it. So perhaps what the author of Save the Cat is doing is giving me that very bare bone structure to add the clay to. If I think about it that way, it doesn't feel so academic. It feels like it might be helpful. So anyway,
Mhm.
I'm thinking these thoughts as I approach the whole subject of writing a novel.
Are you thinking of sticking to small town fiction or
I can't
yeah.
go off and I can't go off
One
and write
challenge at a
about
time, right?
I can't go off and write about a tech savvy kid in Cupertino or whatever it's called. All of a sudden
You
in the
can't you're
future,
not
I
about
can't.
to write some fantasy novel or
No,
like
I'm not. I'm not. I'm writing my people. I'm writing what I was born to write. I'm writing the only voices I know. To
yeah.
try anything else, John Updike, his novels especially would take on new subjects like his Rabbit series, Rabbit Run, Rabbit at Rest, Rabbit is Rich. His character, Harry Angstrom, who was nicknamed Rabbit, became a car dealer and he became rich. He had a dealership. I think it was a Honda dealership, and he became
Mm,
rich. And John Updike learned all about the car business. And I'm talking not just a dealership in a small town. He learned about the entire thing in the world. He learned about the Japanese influence on cars. He
sure.
just everything. So he researched it deeply. So I suppose I could do that, but I don't want to. I want to write about my people. I never run out of ideas
That's
for
awesome.
yeah.
I see, that's why I always am so fascinated by writers who are like just so prolific, who just have all these ideas and who are like not just I'm talking about people who write books, like they just have ideas for books.
Yeah.
Oh, this my next book is going to be this and that, and then my other book, or even there's a strong trend in romance where it's like a lot of interconnected standalones of like romance where it's just like one group of friends or a group of teammates and they all have their own story and I just get so impressed by people who there are obviously there's a formula to follow, and whether you're writing romance, thriller, suspense, historical fiction, a lot of ideas, the whole story arc, the whole formula is almost the same. But I think I just get so impressed by people who are like either plot it out, but then they have the dialogue and they have the plot and they have callbacks or Easter eggs and
Yes, right,
foreshadowing and
right.
all of that over 5 book series. And they build the loyalty like that. So I just get so impressed by like when you say, "Oh, I've got so many ideas," I'm like, just put them away, write them down so that you can come back to them later.
Flannery O'Connor said that anyone who survived a childhood has all that he or she ever needs to become a writer. And I believe that's true. So when I say I have so many ideas, I'll finish a story and then I'll moon around the house for a while and I'll say to my wife, I'm peering into the black abyss because I don't have an idea. I don't have a
Mm.
new story that is cooking. But then all of a sudden there is an idea. And I'll drive past a house and I'll see an old lady out there mowing the lawn, and she's pushing the mower like it's a walker in a rest home. And then one day I drive past the house, and for the first time in forever, she's not mowing the lawn, a young woman is. And I decide that young woman is her daughter, and the old lady is either dead or she's upstairs sick.
Mm.
And then a whole story presents itself to me with those two characters. And before you know it, I've got something else. And that story, Her Precious Things, is in the collection, and it was published in the Common a year or two ago too, the Common online magazine.
Yeah, Her Precious Things, was that with the hold
It's
on a
about the
second.
cabin in the back.
Yeah, the cabin. Hold on, hold on. Yeah, I remember that one really stuck with me.
Her brother Alex is adopted and pushes himself on her.
Yes. And I just think that's so the way that the story that you wrote that story, it was classic. Like you're leading the reader on and we're what happened? And then
Yeah.
we're what's because there's it's like the big elephant in the room, but it's that spot and she like visits where she hid her box or whatever, like her
Yes, her precious thing.
and yes, and then it was like once we get closer to the end of the story and the reader realizes or we learn what happened, what was in there, and it was just like I just remember that was like my jaw dropped and it was just like even though I can't like I'm fortunate to not relate to that, but it would still like it hit me. Yeah.
Well,
It was
I was hoping that it would.
yeah.
I always want my readers to, I always want my stories to be page turners. I want to go, what the heck is going to
Yes.
happen next? They can't wait to see. Back at
Expect it.
Iowa, one of my favorite professors says you've got to always, they have to always be page turners. They're not
Mhm.
intellectual exercises. They're exercises of the gut and the heart. I want my reader to be like we are when we go to the movies. We go to a really wonderful movie in a dark theater and we forget that we're watching a movie because we are so deep into the protagonist's experience. We forget that we're there in a theater seat. And then when the lights come on, it's shocking. You're sent back to the world. That's how I want my stories to be.
That's no, that's perfect. That's a perfect way to look at it to be like what looking ahead when you start a new story and you're like it's actually one of my questions. What do you hope readers get out of it? And you're like, it's looking at the end game. You're looking at the goal. How are you going to accomplish that?
There's a writer of a story collection called Knock 'em Stiff, and the writer's name is Donald Ray Pollock, and Knock 'em Stiff is an actual town in Ohio. I think it's a literal actual town. And I patterned Mount Moriah after that. And I was watching an interview with him one time, and a young man was asking him about the themes and meanings of his work. And he said, really, I just write the stories, almost as though he didn't know what the themes and meanings were. They appear in spite of his intentions. I've had people say to me, your story is about this and it's about that. And I say, that wasn't my intention, but yeah, you're right. It is a creature, an entity all its own. And my characters are that too. When I'm lucky, that's when it's really working.
Or just except for what I say, no, your characters are not redeemable. You're like, no, some of them are Megan.
I love most of my characters,
And you should.
I want them to do well. I want them to be happy and safe. Obviously, it doesn't work out that way for some of them. I want our hearts to be with them. Like again, we can't be spoilers, but at the end of say Little Dude, when Mitch is recognizing that he will always be alone, even
Mhm.
his friend Lloyd and his girlfriend Betty G, they're going to go off into the world. Lloyd back to his church and family, and Betty G to the bakery that she hopes to start. And Mitch realizes that he'll always be alone. He's a bad kid. He's a little criminal. He's a small town criminal. He's got everything that's coming to him as far as legal trouble. But I want the readers, nevertheless, wish him well and hope and hope that he can make it, hope that he can do better, hope that he can find a way.
Yeah.
It's not exactly redeemable, but I want the reader
It's
to
like you're
wish him
not
well.
necessarily looking for redemption, you're not ready to throw in the towel just yet.
Yeah, I don't want them all dead. And except in the story Please Mr. Please, which is in the center, and I included that because I like it so much. I think it's so much fun. Please Mr. Please. Now this is about for your listeners, this is about a man who trolls the dark highways at night, and he happens on a car accident. And there's a young man and a young woman sitting outside the car, and their car is broken down, rather, not exactly an accident. And he picks them up. He helps them out. It's 4 in the morning. And it turns out that they're bad people, except he's worse. And whenever I tell that to people, I say they're bad people, except he's worse. People always go, ooh. They're always very excited. They want to read it.
That's the hook, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I love it, I love it. Going off of the big old theme, like, how do you navigate the sensitive topics and, like, the troublesome content warnings, trigger warnings, or potential trigger warnings, I should say, stuff like that? Do you just go with kinda what you're feeling? Like, how? Because I imagine I don't know what kind of research you had to do. What is your Google search history questionable? Like, how do you have to talk to other people? Or I kinda wanna explore, like, just how you navigate through that, how you could take care of yourself, your mental health as you're, like, going there.
I don't think about that very much. I hope that my stories will land land with an audience that understands who and what I'm writing about. On the other hand, I will confess that, for example, in the first story, The Continental Divide, Edith, the old lady, imagines where the water flows when it flows down the south side of her property, and she knows it flows south toward the Gulf of Mexico, where moss and copperheads, snakes hang from the trees, and old ladies dance to voodoo. I have her say in the original version, old colored ladies dance to voodoo. Why? Because that's what Edith would say. Not because Edith is 80 plus years old, doesn't know any better. She doesn't mean anything bad by it. And even if she did, that would be true to her character. But I took that word out. You ask about trigger warnings, you ask about that sort of thing. And I took that word out. Old ladies dance to voodoo music. And I let the reader make his or her own conclusions as to what kind of ladies in the South dance to voodoo music. And those ladies would perhaps have Haitian backgrounds or Jamaican backgrounds. They would draw their own conclusions. So every now and then I think about it, but I don't think about it very much. If I
Well, do
did
you
think
I imagine, like, maybe you have editors or beta readers who are like, "This might be problematic."
I have that occasionally, very every now and then, but I mostly have my own internal editor on that subject. If you read the story, Tell Me About Bobby Kennedy toward the end of the collection, there's an old man who polishes golfers' muddy shoes. He cleans up golfers' muddy shoes. I think his name is Abner. I say he's the grandson of sharecroppers. I give him a certain patois, a certain Creole patois, but I never once say that he's black. But
Right.
so often in the rich people's golf clubs where an old man would be in the locker room cleaning the shoes, so often that would be a black man. Not always, but often. And so I do have to think about that stuff, but I've been around the block and I've had editors and I've had friends and family who have said, yeah, maybe you should be careful here. But I think I have my own internal editor that keeps me out of trouble. It certainly didn't stop this book from being published. I didn't have
Sure.
anybody after it was accepted, I didn't have anybody saying, now this line is maybe somewhat problematic. I don't know. Yeah. So there you go.
Yeah, no, I can see that, and I think that's a really a solid kind of method to take where you're trusting your instinct from
Yeah.
what you know and from what you've learned
Yeah.
from public opinion, and then hopefully other people will bring something up if it was that problematic, and
Sure.
'Cause you certainly won't you don't wanna be, like, coddling readers, but you also don't wanna be insensitive, and you don't wanna be out of touch, and you don't wanna but it's like a fine line because you wanna stay true to the authenticity, but then you also don't wanna just be like, "Oh, I can't say this because" but you like how you said, you have to find that, "Oh, he had a Creole look to him or a Creole accent or whatever." It's like you find other ways because I think that's more respectful because it's like you're not just saying black, because that's like what people back then, they would just see the skin color and they wouldn't care.
Yeah,
I'm not from Africa, I'm from the Dominican Republic, and where who
sure,
they have very dark skin, or Haitians, I think.
sure, sure.
Yeah, so I think that's a very smart move by your part to change those, like, descriptions a little bit, so exactly like you said, where readers can interpret themselves and they can
Yeah,
understand that. Yeah,
yes. I do that now and then.
yeah. I no, I so appreciate that, and I think that's just, a tribute to you just learning public opinion and learning the overall perspective of reader trends, and not just I don't wanna say trends, but picking up on things that might be problematic
Yeah,
or that
for
might
sure. I am aware of it. I'd like to say that I write what I write, and I don't, and that's nobody's business. But yes, it is. It is my reader's business. So I
you
think
wanna
about it.
sell your book, right? You want
Yeah.
people to read your
Hmm.
stories, and they're not
Yeah.
gonna if they see your name attached to something that's a little bit out of touch, it's yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Just a couple more questions. So I always ask this. It's a two-parter because I really enjoy learning authors' answers. What were the most challenging parts or stories to write? What were the most enjoyable parts or stories to write?
Interesting. I often find myself writing from a woman's perspective, and I don't know exactly how I got on that, doing that. I have a friend who tells me that when he starts a new story of mine, he sees that the protagonist is a woman, he rubs his hands together in pleasure because he thinks that my stories about women are they're more nuanced and they perhaps
Mm,
dig deeper, they explore more the human condition. He's inclined to think that my male characters I set up and punish. I punish them for their toxic masculinity. I punish them for their selfishness. I punish them for their mansplaining, that sort of thing. And he says I'm inclined to punish my male characters. I'm inclined to explore what goes into making my female characters. And I find that very interesting, and I think that he might be onto something. Maybe because I'm digging into characters who are outside my own experience and my own skin. It causes me to explore. It causes me to think hard and question more.
yeah,
So perhaps in a certain respect, what's hardest and what's easiest for me is almost like the same question. Writing about women from women's perspectives, I of course goes back to what we were talking about just a minute ago. I have to be careful. I can't say dumb things. I can't have a woman character not acting like a woman would act. I have to be, I mean, I grew up with three sisters and a mother. When I've lived a life, it's not, I've been married twice. I'm married, happily married to my second wife. I have, I have insights into the female condition that I think are authentic, but I still have to be careful. I still have to think about it. I still have to be true. So in that respect, I think my friend's read on me is right. Writing from a woman's perspective pushes me to perhaps go deeper into the human condition. I enjoy that. I think it might be easy for me to set up my male characters and knock them down. I think it's fun, but perhaps a little too easy. So I hope that
yeah.
answers your question.
It does. Like you're more confident and comfortable in, like, just doing whatever you want to the male characters, but maybe it is the female characters you're a little more curious and you wanna get it like, you're a little more I don't wanna say self-conscious, but you care a little bit more about exploring and getting it
Well,
right because for men, you have a good understanding
yeah,
of
and perhaps
yeah.
I'm too quick. I'm too quick to go where I think they'd go. But if I could give you an example, in my story, The Half Hour, Maisie Bates slapped by her husband, and he has prior to this time he's shoved her and the like, but he's never slapped her. And now she knows that she's going to go out shopping or taking her child for a haircut, or she's going to go out with a bruise on her face. and this is a bridge too far. And several things unfold, but she turns and she knees him in the groin. She knees him in the crotch. And he falls to the ground, clutching himself and his face all white and all. And in my first version, I had Maisie looking around for something else to hit him with. She was looking for a utensil or something that she could hit him while he's down. I shared that with a woman friend of mine, a novelist, and she says, no. She says he is a danger to her. She would get the fuck out of there. She would cripple him and get the fuck out of there. There's no way that she'd stand there looking for something to hit him with. Yeah, I have to listen to that voice, and it made the story better.
Yeah, like, especially because 'cause she's got the baby at that point, right?
Exactly.
She's, "I
Baby.
have to remove us both from this situation."
Yeah, yeah. And that was a much more authentic resolution to that moment.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's I that speaks to your willingness to be like, "No, you know what? I yeah." You're like, "You're right, okay."
Hmm.
Like, you're accepting a constructive criticism, and it's just in such, like, a sensitive topic like that, like, you have to listen. You have to
Yeah, for
listen to
sure.
other people
You bet.
who yeah, who would not who would be more familiar with that psyche, the context of that situation. Not only maybe the situation, like, they've been in that situation, but just, like, the mindset of a fight or flight kind of
Yeah,
thing, and
exactly. Exactly. And I think maybe I was even thinking from what a man might do. A man might say he's down, I'm going to kick him. And this woman writer, that my critic said, oh no, she'd grab the baby and run. This is her chance.
yeah,
Mm.
100%. I know,
Yeah.
that's awesome. I always find it interesting how yeah, like, the process of either critics or editors or beta readers saying, "Hey, this is probably not realistic," or, "This
Yeah.
is like, a woman would never do that," kind of
Yeah,
thing, and it's
exactly.
super
Exactly.
helpful. It's
Yeah.
super helpful. What advice do you have for others who are either trying to get into writing, like, either short stories or get a collection published? Like, what kind of advice would you have for people who are looking into that or on that path?
I get asked that question these days more than I ever did before, so I have some answers. I would recommend, besides just write and write, and share your writing with people, share your writing with friends and family. There are going to be friends and family that can say, oh, that's great. Oh my goodness, I had no idea you could do that. And then there are going to be friends and family who say, oh, I don't believe this. My wife's that way. If I share a story with her and she'll look at me, she hates it because she wants to like what I write.
Oh,
But if she looks at me and says, I don't get it, if she says, I don't get it, that's I don't get it. 4 words, deadly 4 words, because that means that there's something about the story that doesn't resonate. She doesn't think it's finished. She doesn't believe the character would do that. She doesn't care about the character. She doesn't know why it's a story. But I would first of all say share your work. Share your work with people that are willing to be honest.
y
I would also recommend that people, if they can, go to writers' conferences, things like Kenyon and Breadloaf. I like Kenyon so much because there's a kind of a daily prompt. You're asked, you're given. I remember I was given the name Brock, Brock. I was supposed to come back the next day with a 500-word story, a piece of flash fiction about a character named Brock. I'd never known a Brock. Brock struck me as a rich kid name. So
sure, yeah.
I came back with Brock having being a rich kid that is in he's a management trainee working in a trailer factory in an RV factory among the hillbillies and Amish boys. And so he's kind of like a fish out of water. I wrote a
Yeah.
very short piece about Brock. I'd recommend people go off to these conferences if they can. And finally, I always tell people that you have to have a balance between and humility. You have to
Mm,
be you have to be arrogant enough to believe that you belong there. When
yeah,
I went to Iowa, I was very green, I was very young, but I fortunately had a certain arrogance that said, I belong here. I can do this. I can hang with these geniuses. I can do it. And so I was never destroyed by criticism. I always believed that I belonged there. But then the humility part, and we talked about that a minute ago. Be willing to listen. Don't
yeah.
get up on your hind legs and think that you're perfect or that this paragraph cannot go. because it's so beautiful. No, it might be the very thing that stops your story from being a good one. You have to have the humility to listen. So arrogance and humility, finding that balance, that would be my recommendation. And
That is
it strikes
such
me that's a good recommendation for life, is it not?
It really is. I was gonna say that's solid advice for anyone, either in life, professional, personal. Because I am like I started doing this 5 years ago, and that's because my cousin pushed me to start doing it. And I look at my like when someone like the interviews that I've done from when I first started versus now, it's like I could tell how much I've learned, and it's just that's such a solid piece of advice because that just reminds me of like myself where I'm like, you know what? I feel confident and like I could be a big dork sometimes and I ramble on like in the interviews and stuff, but I just own it and I'm like I'm going to ramble on and rant about how amazing or what I liked about your work and then we're going to roll with it. And as long as you roll with it too, like we're going to have a great time.
Oh
But
yeah,
at the
absolutely a
beginning,
great time for sure, for sure.
oh, I appreciate it.
And
But
there's
like when
nothing
I was
there. You haven't once been a dork, from my opinion.
okay.
Mm.
Thank you. I appreciate that. But just yeah, just like when I first started out, I would get kind of like nervous, like speaking to these talented people, like you talented people who produce such great work and creative work. And but then once I get down to it, I realize like you guys are people. And you're just people. They'll ask you questions, let you talk about yourself, let you talk about your work, and then it goes into like with me being a bookworm and things that I pick up on and things like that, and giving you an opportunity to speak. And it's just we just go natural and I'm not like hung up on like not getting so nervous. And even just in general, it's giving me confidence in life, like putting myself out there
Oh
and being
heck
like,
yeah, I
yeah,
understand perfectly.
yeah.
Absolutely, yeah,
Because it's like you gotta have confidence, but also not get too arrogant. I love that. I
yeah.
love that.
Both at the same
Yes.
time.
Yes.
Find that balance.
Be like, no, I'm awesome. I'm a bad bitch, but I will also acknowledge there I don't know everything about the
Yeah,
world. So
yeah.
okay, Bob Johnson, where can we find you online and on social media?
BobJohnsonWriter.com. BobJohnsonWriter.com. The book is for sale on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and different places. There's also a Kindle version. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Insta.
Show notes and stuff like
WriterBob50 on
that.
Insta, and on Facebook, I'm just Bob Johnson. And I'm on Blue Sky. I'm not on Twitter anymore. I don't remember my Blue Sky handle because they're so complicated to write. I've forgotten it, but I don't have very many followers on Blue Sky anyway.
Can we find all your links on your website and stuff?
Sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect, perfect.
Yeah.
That's like easy hub headquarters for you as Bob the
I
writer.
also I read a monthly newsletter, which when people go to my website, they are welcome to sign up. I have about 80 subscribers now, which strikes me as quite a few. I didn't think that many people cared what I said. But I write about the writing life and I write about my stories. I wrote my April one, going to come out in a week or so today, and it's about getting started on my novel and all the
Perfect.
trepidations I'm going through on that subject.
Yes, I will encourage people to sign up. I'll probably sign up after this conversation just to make sure I could keep up with you. So, Bob Johnson, The Continental Divide, that book is available now. Thank you so much for this conversation, for being authentic with your answers, and for not being afraid to go there in your writing and in the conversation. And if and when you publish that big project that's coming next, feel free to keep in touch. I'd love to chat with you again.
We'll chat more for sure. I've enjoyed this very much.
And there you go. That was Bob Johnson talking about his collection of short stories, The Continental Divide, that is available now. Check out the show notes where you can find links to purchase the book and to find Bob online and on social media. Find Cantina Book Club online and on social media while you're at it. I'd really appreciate it just so that you can stay up to date with any authors that are coming up or book reviews. CantinaBookClub.com if you need book recommendations, or you can just reach out to me directly. I'd love to suggest you books that I've read and authors that I've read, either whatever genre you're looking for. I have no problem with recommending books. And I'm also building up the Patreon. So if you're interested, you can subscribe for as little as $1 a month just to help me out and to support the show. But either way, as always, thank you guys so much for listening.